Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to sift through the sources you've provided and get to the heart of the matter.
That's right.
Today, we're diving into a really complex and frankly pretty difficult story. We're tracing the legal life of someone whose name went from, local police blotters right up to massive national headlines and then ended up with a state prison sentence.
We're talking about Crystal Mangum,
Exactly, the Chronicle of Crystal Mangum.
born July 18, 1978 in Durham, North Carolina. The sources, they mention her background as a former exotic dancer, sure, but the core facts are her current status, incarcerated for second-degree murder since 2013.
And her public life really split into two distinct parts, didn't it?
Completely. First, there was this huge wave of attention from allegations we now know, based on her own admission, were false. And then the second part, this undeniable tragic reality of a homicide conviction.
So our goal here is, as always, objective chronological analysis. We want to step back from let's say, the sensationalism that really drove her public image for so long.
Right. Stick to the facts and the sources.
We'll trace that pattern of legal trouble, starting with her earliest encounters, then moving through the infamous false allegations in 2006 against those Duke lacrosse players.
Which became an international story.
Absolutely. And then finally, we'll dig into the details of her conviction for stabbing Reginald Day in 2011.
And that chronological approach is key because you really see this escalating pattern of conflict with the law.
It's stark, isn't it? The contrast.
It really is. Gaining global notoriety, becoming this, symbol for so many different issues based on a story she herself eventually admitted she fabricated decades later.
Decades.
And that confirmed ability to lie on such a massive scale, it sits right alongside the undeniable fact of her murder conviction. It's just this constant thread of legal issues, deception, escalating violence.
Yeah.
It really demands a closer look.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Before 2006, before the Duke case made her a household name, what did the sources tell us about her early life? Her first run-ins with the justice system in Durham.
Well, her roots are completely in Durham, North Carolina. Born and raised there, youngest of 3 kids. Her dad, Travis, was a truck driver. Her mom's name was Mary. She did graduate high school, Hillside High, back in 1996.
And she pursued education beyond high school too, right? Which sometimes gets lost.
It does. She got an associate degree from Durham Technical Community College in 2004. And here's a detail that really stands out. In 2006, right when the Duke thing happened, she was actually a full-time student at North Carolina Central University.
Studying what?
Police psychology. And apparently doing okay, maintaining a 3.0 GPA.
Wow. Police psychology, given everything else, that's quite something. It suggests maybe an awareness of the system.
It certainly makes you wonder. And it contrasts sharply with her first documented serious allegation, which the sources placed way back in 1996.
What happened then?
So in 96, she files a police report. She claims she was kidnapped and raped 3 years before that when she was about 14.
3 years prior.
Yes. She named 3 people, one of whom was her 21-year-old boyfriend at the time, which would make it statutory rape anyway. But the crucial part, looking back, is that she pretty quickly backed away from the charges, didn't follow through.
And the sources suggest even her family had doubts about the story she told.
Yeah, the accounts are messy. Her father apparently went on record saying he didn't believe it happened, or at least not how she described it, didn't think she was injured. Her mother seemed to think something might have happened, but maybe later, closer to when the report was filed, when Crystal was 17 or 18. It muddies the timeline Crystal gave.
So this very first instance involves a serious sexual assault claim. No legal action follows, and there are these conflicting family statements about whether it even happened as described.
Exactly. It's kind of a disturbing foreshadowing of the Duke situation, isn't it? An early pattern of serious claims not holding up under scrutiny or follow-through.
Okay, what about after high school? The sources mention the Navy.
Correct. Right after graduating in 96, she joined the Navy. Trained in radios, navigation tech, but she wasn't in for long, less than 2 years.
Why the short service?
She was discharged after becoming pregnant. And then soon after, she got married to a Kenneth Nathaniel McNeil. That marriage didn't last long either, and it apparently ended badly.
Oh, so.
She filed a police report accusing him of making death threats. I mean, that's a serious charge. But again, a familiar pattern emerges. The charge got dismissed because she failed to show up in court.
Another instance of initiating a serious legal complaint and then not following through?
It seems so. The pace of these conflicts really seems to pick up steam as we get closer to 2006. especially with that taxicab incident in 2002.
Right, that wasn't just like a minor dispute. That sounds pretty serious.
Oh, it was incredibly reckless. By 2002, she's back in Durham working as an exotic dancer. The incident kicks off when she steals a customer's taxi after giving him a lap dance.
Just steals the taxi.
Yep. And then it turns into a full-blown police chase. Speeds hit 70 miles per hour. She's driving in the wrong lane, total disregard for anyone's safety.
How did it end?
It ended when she rammed the stolen cab into a police car, actually hit the patrol car, narrowly missing the officer who was standing nearby.
Right.
And on top of all that, her blood alcohol content was more than twice the legal limit.
Good grief. So, larceny, DUI, high-speed chase, assault on an officer. That's a laundry list of serious charges. What happened legally?
She was initially hit with 10 different charges, but eventually she pled guilty to 4 main counts: assault on a government official, larceny, speeding to elude arrest, and driving while impaired.
And the sentence?
It sounds relatively light considering 3 weekends in jail.
Yeah.
But she also had to pay $4,200 in restitution and fees, plus got 2 years of probation.
Okay, let's pause here for a second if we connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
The early rape claim inconsistencies, the failed marriage with the threat allegation she didn't pursue, and now this violent high-speed confrontation with police in 2002.
You see a definite pattern emerging before the national spotlight, right?
Absolutely. A pattern of legal noncompliance, volatility.
And making serious claims she doesn't always back up.
Hmm.
Plus, this tendency for disputes to escalate into really dangerous criminal conflicts involving vehicles or weapons.
It sets the stage, doesn't it? Her life was already operating at these chaotic extremes well before 2006.
Exactly. That groundwork is crucial for understanding what came next.
And what came next? Well, this is where things got incredibly complicated and damaging, especially for the 3 young men involved. March 2006, the Duke lacrosse case. It became this instant national flashpoint. How did it start?
So March 2006, Mangum and another dancer are hired for a party. It's late at night, hosted by some captains of the Duke University men's lacrosse team.
And the sources are clear she wasn't sober when she arrived.
Yes, confirmed. She arrives intoxicated, had been drinking alcohol, and also took cyclobenzaprine, which is a muscle relaxant. Apparently an argument broke out during the party. She got angry and left the house.
But the assault allegation didn't happen right then and there, did it? That's a key detail.
Absolutely critical distinction. It wasn't immediate. After leaving the party, she actually got into a fight with the other dancer. It was serious enough that the police had to intervene.
Okay.
And the responding officer felt her state was so unstable, intoxicated, emotionally distressed, that he took her to a local drug and mental health center for involuntary commitment.
Involuntary commitment.
Right. And it was there, while being processed, that she made the sexual assault allegation. Reportedly, it came after being asked a leading question by someone on staff.
And the media reaction was just instantaneous, explosive. It tapped right into these deep societal fault lines.
Oh, completely. Race, class, privilege. It had everything. Here you had a working-class black woman, a mother student working in the sex industry, accusing these young, affluent white athletes from elite Duke University. It was like a perfect storm for media and activist narratives.
And the sources are really damning about the role of the local district attorney, Mike Nafong, in fanning those flames.
Nifong's conduct. It's really presented as the central institutional failure here. He pushed forward with the charges, serious charges, rape and kidnapping, even though there were huge red flags about Mangum's credibility almost immediately. Her story kept changing.
And his motive? The sources suggest politics.
Widely believed to be his upcoming re-election campaign, yes. But it went beyond just pursuing a weak case. The most serious finding was that he actively conspired with the director of a private DNA lab.
To do what?
To withhold exculpatory evidence. Evidence that proved the players were innocent.
What was that evidence specifically?
It was the DNA results. Testing found no DNA from any of the accused lacrosse players on Mangum's body or her clothing. There was DNA from other men, unidentified men, but nothing matching the accused players or indeed any of the 46 members of the lacrosse team tested, aside from incidental contact.
And Nifong knew this and hid it.
He knew and suppressed it. That's the finding. It was such a blatant ethical and legal breach that eventually the North Carolina Attorney General's office had to step in. About a year later, they took over the case, dismissed all the charges, and issued this very public, very formal declaration that the 3 players, Reed Sligman, Colin Finnerty, and David Evans, were innocent victims of a tragic rush to accuse.
What happened to Nifong after all that? He couldn't just walk away from that level of misconduct.
No, the consequences for him were severe, which is quite rare for prosecutors. He wasn't just kicked off the case. The North Carolina State Bar disbarred him, found him guilty of fraud, dishonesty, misrepresentation, the works.
Disbar.
And then he was actually convicted of criminal contempt and spent a day in jail. It was a complete professional implosion, and the Attorney General formally apologized to the players for what they went through.
But even after all that, the case collapsing, Mifung disgraced, the players declared innocent. Mangum didn't back down initially, did she?
Not at all. Quite the opposite. 2 years later, in 2008, she published a memoir, The Last Dance for Grace, the Crystal Mangum story.
And in the book.
She doubled down, insisted the assault happened exactly as she'd claimed, argued the dismissal was just politics. And she even used the book to bring up that old, unsubstantiated 1993 rape claim again. She stuck to that story for years.
Which makes the final twist in this part of the story even more stunning. The admission, decades later.
Yeah. This only came out relatively recently, December 11, 2024. It was an on-camera interview, and she just admitted it. Publicly stated she provided false testimony against the players.
What exactly did she say? Did the sources quote her?
They do. She said, I testified falsely against them by saying that they raped me when they didn't, and that was wrong, and I betrayed the trust of a lot of other people who believed in me. She went on to say she made up a story that wasn't true because I wanted validation from people and not from God.
Wow. Validation from people. So connecting this back, that admission, nearly 20 years later, it just seals it, doesn't it? It confirms the whole thing was based on a deliberate lie.
It absolutely confirms it. It underscores this profound capacity for deception she possessed, a deception powerful enough to manipulate the justice system, ruin lives, and ignite a national firestorm, all by her own admission for validation. It's chilling.
And the sources make it clear that shortly after the Duke case faded from the headlines, but before this admission, her pattern of volatility didn't just continue, it escalated. Let's talk about the Milton Walker incident in 2010.
Right, February 2010. This really shows that escalation in her domestic conflicts. Police get called late at night, just before midnight on the 17th. And the person who called 911, her own 9-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow. What did police find?
They found Mangum actively fighting with Milton Walker, who was her live-in partner at the time.
And it wasn't just a fight. It involved fire, right? Arson charges.
It did. During the altercation, she actually set fire to Walker's clothes while they were in the bathtub. This wasn't just a small flare-up. It caused serious smoke and fire damage to the apartment building, putting everyone there at risk.
So the initial charges must have been severe.
Extremely severe. Attempted murder, first-degree arson, assault and battery, identity theft, communicating threats, property damage, resisting an officer, and even misdemeanor child abuse because her daughter witnessed it all.
Attempted murder and first-degree arson. Those are huge. How did the pre-trial phase go?
Well, initially her bond was set at $1 million. Reflects how serious those charges were, but it was later lowered to $100,000 in May 2010, and she got out on house arrest with an electronic monitor.
But did she comply with the conditions, given the pattern?
Predictably, no. Stability didn't last. By August 2010, she was arrested again, this time for violating her release conditions, specifically rules about visiting her kids. Her bond was up to $150,000.
So, facing these incredibly serious felony charges, what was the actual outcome when it went to trial in December 2010?
The outcome was surprisingly minimal, considering the initial charges. The jury convicted her, yes, but only on misdemeanor counts, contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile, injury to personal property, and resisting an officer.
What happened with the big ones? Attempted murder? Arson?
The attempted murder charge seems to have faded, but the key failure for the prosecution was the first-degree arson charge. The jury deadlocked. Couldn't reach a unanimous verdict.
Deadlocked how? What was the vote?
The vote was 9-3 in favor of not guilty. So 9 jurors didn't believe she committed felony arson.
Interesting. Why would they deadlock like that, especially if she clearly caused property damage? What does that suggest?
It suggests the prosecution couldn't prove the necessary intent for first-degree arson beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense probably argued it was an impulsive act of rage, setting his clothes on fire, not a calculated attempt to burn down the building or kill him.
So they accepted she caused damage, hence the injury to property conviction, but couldn't agree on the higher intent for arson.
Exactly. Judge Abe Jones had to declare a mistrial on the arson count. And then, in January 2011, the DA's office announced they wouldn't bother retrying her on the arson charge.
So she faced attempted murder and arson and walked away with basically time served 88 days on misdemeanors.
Pretty much. It really reinforces this narrative of her somehow managing to avoid the most severe consequences for incredibly dangerous action.
That pattern is just stark. Severe allegations followed by either her own noncompliance or convictions on much lesser charges.
Unmistakable. But unfortunately, that pattern reached its absolute tragic culmination less than a year later.
April 2011, the death of Reginald Day. This is where the pattern of violence hits its peak. What happened?
She was arrested on April 3rd, 2011. The reason? Repeatedly stabbing her boyfriend, Reginald Day, during yet another domestic fight.
And the initial charge reflected the seriousness right away.
Yes, initially it was a Class C felony. Assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill or inflict serious bodily injury. A very serious charge on its own.
But Day's injuries were too severe.
Tragically, yes. Just 10 days after the stabbing, Reginald Day died in the hospital from his injuries.
And the charges against Mangum.
Immediately upgraded to murder. First-degree murder, initially. Her bail was set at $300,000 secured. There were some standard legal proceedings, like assessing competency, and by November 2011, she was officially deemed competent to stand trial for his murder.
So the trial happens in 2013. What were the core arguments? Her defense was self-defense, right?
That was the core of her defense, yes. Her lawyers argued she acted entirely in self-defense, claimed she was afraid Day was assaulting her and was going to kill her, and she stabbed him to protect herself.
A classic but complex legal defense. How did the prosecution counter that?
They had two main lines of attack against the self-defense claim. First, forensic evidence related to the stab wounds themselves. Second, and perhaps most crucially, Reginald Day's own dying declaration.
A dying declaration. What did he say?
Just before he died, Day apparently stated very clearly that he was trying to get away from Mangum when she stabbed him. He was retreating, trying to escape the confrontation.
And how did the prosecution use that with the forensics?
They argued the physical evidence, the location, the angle, the repeated nature of the stab wounds was consistent with Day's statement. Consistent with an attack on someone trying to flee, not someone defending themselves against an aggressor. If the victim is trying to get away, it fundamentally undermines the legal justification for using lethal force in self-defense. That was the key distinction they pushed.
So the jury had to weigh her claim of fear and self-defense against the victim's last words and the physical evidence suggesting an attack on the retreating man.
Exactly. It was her word against his dying declaration backed by forensics.
And the verdict?
On November 22, 2013, the jury, 7 men, 5 women, came back with a conviction. Not for first-degree murder, but for second-degree murder.
What does second degree imply here?
It implies they believe she acted with malice, meaning intent to kill or cause serious harm, but without the premeditation or deliberation required for a first-degree conviction. It wasn't planned, perhaps, but it was malicious.
And the
Judge Paul Ridgway sentenced her to serve between 14 years and 2 months minimum and 17 years and 9 months maximum in the state prison system.
And based on the sources, what's her current status?
She is still incarcerated in the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. Her projected release date, assuming good behavior and serving the minimum, is February 27, 2026.
So, not that far off, relatively speaking.
No, not that far off.
Now, even after the conviction and sentencing, the sources indicate she didn't just quietly serve her time, she kept fighting legally.
Oh, yeah. She continued to challenge the system aggressively. In 2015, she filed an appeal against the murder conviction itself. The basis was apparently questioning whether testimony about an argument she had with a different man back in 2010 should have been allowed in the murder trial.
And she went after her own lawyers, too.
She did. Filed formal grievances with the North Carolina bar against the lawyers who defended her in the murder trial and against the lawyer who handled her appeal. But the bar reviewed the complaints and decided not to take any disciplinary action against them.
There was also another legal challenge she mounted years later, related to some money orders.
That's right. This was in 2018. It shows her, continued engagement with the legal fallout. She filed motions claiming malicious prosecution against the police and the DA's office. This related back to larceny charges from 2011.
Larceny charges? From when she was arrested for the stabbing?
Exactly. When they arrested her for stabbing Day, they found she had 2 money orders that belonged to him. She claimed Day had given them to her for rent money and even alleged he'd told an officer this before he died.
So she was claiming the police and DA pursued those larceny charges maliciously, knowing she had a legitimate reason to have them. What happened with that motion?
Well, the judge, Judge Thompson, dismissed her claim entirely. But not because he decided whether the prosecution was malicious or not. He was dismissed on a technicality, the statute of limitations, meaning she waited too long to file the claim. There's a 3-year window to file for malicious prosecution, and she filed it way too late in 2018 for charges stemming from 2011.
So that claim went nowhere. But it's important, as the sources note, that she was never actually convicted of those specific larceny charges related to the money orders.
Correct. Never convicted of that particular theft. But the attempt to sue years later certainly shows her persistence in challenging every aspect of the legal process surrounding Day's death.
Okay, let's talk about how all of this played out in the media. What stands out to you about the coverage? It feels like her story went through distinct phases in the public eye.
It's a fascinating evolution, really. First, the Duke case was this massive global socio-political event. Debates about race, class, gender, justice, institutional failure. It was huge. But once the homicide conviction happened, the narrative really shifted.
How so?
It became much more of a standard, albeit tragic, true crime story. The outlets covering the murder tended to focus more on the domestic violence angle, the volatile relationship, the stabbing itself, less sociology, more, well, spectacle.
Can you give us some examples of that true crime coverage? The sources list a few shows.
Sure. Her case got picked up by several major true crime series. Wives with Knives did an episode called Stripped to the Bone back in December 2012. That one's notable because it actually included a jailhouse interview with Mangum.
An interview with her? What does she talk about?
Mostly focused on the Reginald Day murder, her version of events, the self-defense claim. Then Fatal Attraction covered it in August 2014 with an episode titled Toxic Romance. And later, Snapped did an episode specifically on Crystal Mangum in October 2018.
So a steady stream of true crime interest focused on the homicide.
Right. But at the same time, the Duke lacrosse chapter wasn't forgotten. It kept getting revisited, too, often as a cautionary tale about media frenzy and injustice.
Like the ESPN documentary.
Exactly. ESPN's 30 for 30 series aired Fantastic Lies in 2016. That was a really in-depth look back at the Duke case, focusing heavily on the false accusation, Nifong's misconduct, and the devastating impact on the players. It cemented that part of her legacy, too.
So her name remains linked to both things: the massive institutional failure she triggered and the personal violence she was ultimately convicted of.
Absolutely. She occupies this really unusual space in public memory because of those two distinct but equally dramatic narratives.
This kind of persistent dual-track media attention, what does it suggest about her story, do you think?
Well, the sheer length of time her name has stayed relevant from 2006 right up to recent years is pretty remarkable. It shows how deeply her story resonated, touching on these incredibly sensitive nerves in society. And, the sources even draw a parallel to the Tawana Brawley case from 1987.
Another high-profile racially charged case involving false allegations.
Exactly. It provides that historical context, showing how these kinds of cases can just explode and take on a life of their own, regardless of the underlying facts. They become cultural moments, for better or worse.
So let's recap. We've followed this timeline. The early signs of conflict and, frankly, deception in 1996 and 2002, then the massive, nationally damaging fabrication in the Duke case in 2006, which she finally publicly admitted to in 2024.
Followed by the clear escalation with the attempted murder and arson charges in 2010.
And culminating in the second-degree murder conviction for Reginald Day's death, stemming from the 2011 stabbing leading to her current incarceration.
When you put it all together like that, chronologically, the picture is one of consistent, escalating conflict. Conflict with boyfriends, with the law, with the truth itself. It moves from things like car chases and questionable allegations to proven false testimony on a national stage, and ultimately to taking another person's life.
A pattern of violence, deceit, and serious criminal acts that the justice system seemed unable to fully reckon with until the final fatal incident.
That seems to be the inescapable conclusion from the sources, yes.
And that leaves us with a pretty heavy final thought for you, the listener, to consider. We now have Crystal Mangum's own on-camera admission from 2024, confirming she deliberately fabricated the Duke lacrosse allegations, a lie that profoundly damaged innocent lives and corrupted the justice system.
A confirmed capacity for major calculated deception.
Exactly. So the question is, how might knowing that confirmed history of profound deception affect how you view her later conviction for second-degree murder? Remember, that conviction hinged on rejecting her self-defense claim in favor of the victim's dying words and forensic evidence.
Does her proven ability to construct and maintain a massive lie influence how credible you find her self-defense claim in the Day case? Or are the two completely separate events in your mind?
It's a complex question with no easy answer. Something to think about.